I was born in Pasadena at the Huntington Memorial Hospital. I had a brother who was 2 years younger, and my father was a mortician. He met my mother, who was an executive secretary there, and they married. My mother was Norwegian. She was the first child of 2 immigrants. My father was a very charismatic guy. He was, everyone loved him. He was very joyful. You know, he taught me how to see, really, because he would get up in the morning and he would say, "Come on, Barb, get up, everybody get up. It's so beautiful outside. Come out, you've got to see this rose," or something. And we'd go out and we'd look at something beautiful. They're always, both of them were very involved with how wonderful nature is. And my mother was more like almost like a classic Norwegian. She was a good mom, but I always thought that she didn't love me, you know, because God knows why. And I couldn't get close to her because she was more closed off. And my father was very accessible, so I became kind of a classic father's daughter. My instructions for my family was, go to Pomona, date other guys, and essentially find a upscale, acceptable mate. That became the message. You're supposed to go to college to find a husband, really. And a suitable husband. I was encouraged to you know, make art, and I began to have this idea that I would be an artist. You know, it was like a put down. It wasn't spoken directly, but they would not have understood at that time. I wanted to go to graduate school. I asked them, what about graduate school? And they just acted as if I had not said anything. I think it was a big sacrifice to even send me to college, period. And they didn't want to think anything past that. So I realized I can't go to graduate school. I don't know what the heck I'm going to do when I get out of college. And I thought, well, okay, Alan wants to marry me. I love him. Let's get married. He was perfect. He was the perfect potential husband for me, right? But from that time on, as I look back, and I began to feel as if I was living in someone else's dream. I was like a Barbie, you know, doing Barbie things that she's supposed to wear and she's supposed to do. But at the same time, and then we said, well, let's have a baby. I said that, and Alan says, "You sure you want to?" "Yeah, sure." And I didn't think that I would get pregnant right away, but I did. And so I began to have time, you know, and I then told Alan one day when we went for a walk that, you know, I think I'm going to start painting. And Alan said, "Well, sure, that's okay." But what I meant was more than just making some paintings. I meant that I'm going to start doing art again as a serious activity. And I did make some paintings down there. We then did a driving trip across the country. Rick was about almost 2 years old, and we got a house in Arcadia. And then got settled, doing a little bit of art, not really a lot. And then I had Julie, my next child, and again had this depression, and I was, you know, it took about a year. It was longer. Depression, postnatal depression, is not uncommon, but it was longer than I thought it should last. You've been educated, a terrific education, and it's not doing any, you can't use it. At least that's the way it felt to me. I think now people have better sense of options. The first big piece that I did was this thing called a ritual meal. It was this meal where the people are kept outside for a really long time until everyone arrives. As they enter, there's the sound of the human heartbeat is just blasting through the house. Dun-dun, dun-dun. And so it raises anxiety level. The guests are put into like surgical clothes, surgical hats and surgical coats, I think. And the food is is edible, good food, except that it connotes that they're eating a dead body. They aren't given anything to eat with, and so they have to figure it out. So they, have to eat it, and then somebody comes and washes their hands. Meantime, there's this intense sound going on, and then there's projections that are going on all over, like projections of the cosmos, galaxies and things like that. And then on the walls, there's these projections of body systems. So it reinforces the idea that they're eating a human body. And then on the wall over here, or somewhere, there's a film of the sea coming in and out and in and out. And it's sort of like taking me and everyone back to the beginning of life, really. And the ethic or the philosophy was that there's this unrepeatable moment, and if you're not there, you miss it, because there's no record of it. I got this room that was their women's restroom, and the building had been probably a 1920s print shop, printing newspapers or something. One tiny little stall with a door and a little basin, and then all this space that they probably had cots. I'm just thinking, I'm making this up, but there's this idea that women were frail and that we'd probably faint all the time. There was this voice on a tape loop that was saying over and over again, "Feed me." It was instructions, it said over and over again, "Feed me." And so I was sitting on a mattress that had oriental rugs on it, and then I had a lot of different things around the edge of the room. There were some benches and things there, and those things were ways in which people could feed me. I mean, it was about, I was really, here's a feminist. This is my first overtly feminist piece. I sat there, and I sat there naked because I wasn't trying to be overpowering. I didn't want to just, like a few of my friends said, you ought to have a gun in there, and that's just recognition of how dangerous the relationships between men and women can be. And I said, no, because that takes away the real, they'll just act because they're scared. They won't act because they get it. And they'd come in and they'd say hi, and we'd have this conversation. I'd find out their name, we'd start talking, and everyone was different, but eventually they say, the typical thing was, "Oh, I get it." Like, "You want me to feed you?" And so there was never a time that someone offered something that I didn't say yes. I mean, they're all things I liked, but they had to negotiate. They had to offer, and then I could say yes or no. And this was, there was a person here that they were dealing with, and so it went on all night. It was very amazing. And so that's the interactive thing. I was pushing the viewer, we'll say. Art doesn't happen just by passively looking at something. Oh, isn't that nice? Isn't that nice? Art is something that you figure out as the observer. The observer is as much of an obligation as the artist, or almost as much. I mean, you don't have to do that to everything, but if something tweaks it, figure it out, look at it, see what's going on, and don't discount what you know. In order to make a baby, you have to have two, a male and female. Well, if you bring two different entities together and they merge, you're going to have a third thing come out of it. That's the way I look at this squash thing, because these two groups came together, they merged, and here was this squash, which is like a baby, right? I kept saying, that is so beautiful, I can't throw it out. I'm going to make a religion. It's a holy object. I'm going to make a religion out of it. And everyone went, yeah, right, finally it was decaying pretty much, and so I found, if you polyethylene film, you know, plastic film, can break away from cast resin. It makes a good release agent. So I made a kind of a hammock, put the squash in it, partially. It was all now decaying, and cast it partially in resin. And in this case, it's a feminine object. This is, to me, a feminine religion, because it's like carrying the seeds of the future. It has the seeds in it, if it's a real squash, and if it falls, if it decays in the earth, the body of the squash becomes like fertilizer and heat for the little sprouting babies. Females give birth out of our own bodies. We feed the baby with our own bodies, and even when they're born, we nurse the babies until they're a certain age and they can eat other things. I mean, the female body, the earth, gives birth to every single thing on earth out of its own being. It's a very profound thing. And so this is this holy squash, you see. And we did this parody, and we had two friends, other artists, who are like the farmer and his wife, bringing this baby squash in, and they find this manger in the storefront window, and she's got squash bread, and he's it's all this stuff, and then the shepherds come. They're little street kids that we met and visit the holy squash, and then the wise women come, and we carried it down from the Bronx to the cathedral, which is maybe 5 miles or so, and then had the stone cutting yard all prepared with this fire, and all these people came. It was on the winter solstice. It was really cold, and everyone got little squashes, and they got to do a ceremony, and we had music, sound for all of it, for the procession through the streets. Everyone had ghetto blasters, and then we had music, and then we had these big hula hoops that were stretched with white fabric, and then I had projectors in the 4 directions, and then dancers would dance and turn these hoops, and then they'd catch images as they went through the projections. My Seneca teacher, she came in her full Seneca dress, and she came and she said, Barbara thinks that she found this squash, but the reality is this squash found her. I had this idea of traveling from one place to another as a kind of unnameable being. And I was invited to be in one of the early feminist shows up at Washington University at the Henry Gallery. And so here was a chance to do this on a journey, from San Francisco, where I started, to Seattle. And so I would be all in white, but like I wore, it wasn't a surgeon's coat, it was like a kind of a Chinese waiter's coat. It had these frog kind of buttons, and then I had a cap on my head, which was more like a surgeon's cap, I guess. And my hair was all up in there, and then I painted one side of my face white and the other red. So I'm not trying to be yin and yang, opposites, which I didn't want this to be about. But I looked so weird, and so weird that they wouldn't look at me. That, it'd be like if you're horribly burned or something. That's the complaint that disabled people have, that sometimes people won't deal with you. They won't act as if you're there because they don't know what to do with it. Well, that's exactly what happened, and I was just shaking when I came out. It was so scary. I was involved in the women's building But as you can see, my pieces, except for the Feed Me piece, were not addressing a feminist issue for the most part. Just by doing the art I was doing and making a claim for my right to be and be taken seriously.